Thanks to the new Recollection decks and Silvie Slime Sovereign, Silvie is not only playable, she is now very good. Welcome everyone to our first deck profile for the Grand Archive Mercurial Heart metagame, and I can't believe I get to finally say I have a competitive Silvie list for you here that you can definitely take to your locals the next few weeks and start to crush with and refine and get to the point where maybe we can start to take this to the higher level events that are to come. I'm not going to delay this any further. I know we're all excited. Let's look at my Fire Silvie FireStorm combo deck profile. What's up everyone, it's Dan with Main Deck, back with our first deck profile for the Set 4 Mercurial Heart metagame, and I couldn't be more excited to be covering Silvie in our first deck profile. And this deck, I'll tell you right now, I won our first locals with it as well. This has been one I've been kind of toying with for a little bit. I'm really happy with where it's at right now. I'm sure there are some adjustments that could be made to this, but this is Spirit of Fire Silvie into Silvie Slime Sovereign. And the focus of this deck, I call it FireStorm Silvie because this is very much like a combo-oriented version of this deck where all you're really trying to do is max out the power of Storm Slime, who is just an absolutely absurd card. But that's not really your only route to victory as well, because we do have some backup with some powerful slimes that'll get buffed up as well. Silvie can still crack in for tons of damage, but we'll go through the exact list here and show you why this is really focused on getting those big Storm Slime plays where you can do 7, 8, 10 damage with each Storm Slime trigger and the ability to use them multiple times as well. So starting as usual with our material deck, we're going to start with our Spirit of Fire. We are not playing the Slime Spirit in this one again. We are able to actually play all the different elements, and the different elements give you access to a lot of really powerful action cards. That's the main gain on them. Otherwise, a lot of our deck... Oh, I want to mention right now, if you're looking for a budget deck profile, this deck is probably one of the more budget ones that we are able to show for the Set 4 metagame, and it is so good. Like, it is totally worth it. The only thing that you really are going to need to cover is if you don't have dungeon guides. You might want to get some dungeon guides, although I mean they're not, you don't need them to perform in this deck either, but they will help you go off a little faster. For our Divine Relic, we're using Quicksilver, which is a cheaper one. And a Gaia's Blessing ultra rare from set 1, ultra rare that might start to go up a little bit, so if you don't have one of these yet, maybe snag it right away. Those are the most expensive cards in the deck though. Otherwise, most of this deck is commons, uncommons, and the Silvie Recollection deck. So buy yourself a Silvie Recollection deck, pick up the commons and uncommons you need, a few of these little extra material deck cards that might be a little pricier, some dungeon guides, and you can go to town with this deck. So Spirit of Fire is the spirit we're going to be using here, so we get access to things like Cremation Ritual and Creative Shock and Increasing Danger. Then we're going to Silvie level 1, of course, getting that buff counter on the first slime you play that turn. Sometimes something you need to toy around with a little bit to make sure you get it on the right card, but often that buff counter is just going to let you like clear away an ally that's going to maybe threaten you a little bit. It's not a big deal though. This isn't a Silvie deck. We'll have another Silvie deck profile in the future that focuses more on the buff counters, but this one, it just uses it for a little bit of extra value or Kraken for a little extra damage. We have Silvie level 2, of course, who is going to let us draw a card if we control an animal ally and draw another card if we control a beast ally on the turn when you level to her. The big thing about this is that it actually is not that easy to always get... it's definitely not easy to get 2 draws with it in this deck, and it's actually okay in this deck if you level to 2 and don't get anything out of it. Silvie's level 3 and your endgame is so powerful now that you shouldn't play around trying to always get like max value or even any value out of this. Now, when you can set it up so you can keep some sort of slime in play, a baby red, a baby gray, a limitless, probably one of the easier ones to keep in play. If you can set that up, that's cool. Get a card off of it. If you can ever set up a red slime, get a card off of that. That's probably one of the easier ones to set up too, because your opponent usually doesn't want to take that out without potentially losing their board if they're an ally deck. So you can set that up to get 1 card draw. That's good, but the big thing I want to stress about this is in this deck, you're going to be leveling fast because you want to get to 3, but you don't need to worry about trying to max out your value with Silvie level 2. And now the big thing that you have to understand about this deck is Silvie Slime Sovereign. Silvie Slime Sovereign makes it so when she enters the next slime ally you activate this turn costs 2 less to activate and enters with 2 buff counters on it. And then importantly, you get to ignore the elemental requirements of advanced element slimes, which is how we get to run a Crux, an Arcane, and in addition to our Terra slimes in our advanced slime slots. So this is a very strong ability for the tempo that it gives you. It's going to allow you to pay nothing for your first Storm Slime or Ethereal Slime on your turn, or only 1 for your first Slime King, which then lets you kind of play multiple big slimes the turn you go to level 3 to put a ton of pressure on your opponent really fast, if not outright taking them out of the game. The buff counters that it gets also will allow you to crack in for a ton of extra attack damage off of your Storm Slime or Ethereal Slime. So your goal in this deck is to level to 3 kind of as efficiently and fast as possible, with a few exceptions, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Once you get there, you want to make sure you have protected as many Storm Slimes and or an Ethereal Slime or Slime King, depending, if possible, so you can drop it on the board and either start to like just nuke your opponent with Storm Slime damage, or just establish control over the game with a King Slime where they just can't attack in. That's kind of your goal with this deck, and then at that point, then you're free to just kind of take a little bit of time to find whatever line you need to take the opponent out, usually involving the power of the mighty Storm Slime here. So I have to explain Storm Slime before I explain the rest of the material deck, because you have to understand, since this is a more combo-oriented deck, you have to understand what Storm Slime is doing and why everything in here plays into it. Storm Slime is a 3/1 for 2, Pride 3, which again only matters if your opponent D-levels you, because Silvie level 3 is level 3. Has On Enter as a spell, meaning Spell Shroud will protect against this. Deal damage to target unit equal to the number of slime cards in your banishment. And I can't stress how powerful that ability is. There are lots of ways that we'll go through to get these slimes into your banishment, and the cool thing is, since it counts cards in banishment, there's no way for your opponent to interact with the number of cards available to you. So as long as you continue to build that up throughout the game, anytime you drop a Storm Slime, it'll be massive, massive damage. And to top it all off, it is on death, class bonus, which you're going to have, of course. You may banish 2 cards at random from your memory. If you do, draw 2 cards, which allows you to not only banish more slimes for your future Storm Slimes, but filter out some cards you don't need to find more of your advanced element slimes or, you know, other stuff. So Storm Slime is really powerful, and a lot of this deck is really focused on finding ways to banish these slimes in play. But there are a couple other things in the material deck that'll be useful for other reasons as well. Beast Bondiers, for example, is in here just to get that +1 level when you need to attack with the Slime King, or to potentially turn on an earlier Limitless Slime at a higher level. That's not something that's usually necessary. So this is not a necessary spot in the material deck. If you find something that you would rather have based on your local meta, you can totally pull this out, because attacking with Slime King isn't really that something you want to do a lot of the time anyway, without being able to give him vigor. So Quicksilver Grail is our Divine Relic for this deck, and the reason for that is all of these Terra cards down here. Quicksilver Grail is such a combo with all of those, it's absolutely nuts. I think it's way better than Grand Crusader's Ring in this particular deck, and this deck is trying to go too fast to really care about Temporal Spectrometer. So Quicksilver Grail is the easy choice for this deck. What Quicksilver Grail allows you to do is place any of these Horn of Beast Calling, Stonescale Band, or Verdant Scepter under it, and you can actually set that up an earlier turn, so the turn you level to 3, you are going to have access to whatever you put under here immediately, which is important because, again, when Silvie levels to 3, she's got that On Enter. That turn, her turn is really powerful. So this is the one exception. If you don't have your setup quite right, or if you think you need one of these cards, take a turn to do Quicksilver Grail and pop one of these Terra cards underneath it. Then the next turn, go ahead and go to Silvie Slime Sovereign and go off. Now what these cards do, Horn of Beast Calling, this is crazy. Now that Silvie's good, this card is like, I think, really powerful. It is a 1-cost Regalia with Banish It. The next Beast ally card you activate this turn costs 3 less to activate. Class bonus, draw a card. So for the cost of 1, it's going to replace itself and then act as if you had 3 more cards in hand that turn, which it happens to be the exact amount a Slime King costs. So you can do some pretty crazy turns when you set this up. Plus it draws you the card again to be able to use to play your other slimes or something like that. So you can, the turn you play this, you can like play an Ethereal Slime for free. The turn you go to 3, pop Beast Calling, now play a Slime King. And then after that, you might still have plenty of cards in hand to do Storm Slime because you have lost almost nothing at that point. So there, just make sure you have to have one card down in order to actually play the Horn of Beast Calling out of the Quicksilver Grail. But yeah, it's a really powerful card for some like big turns. Another card that's super powerful and like actually, this is a proxy as Vault card, and it's ridiculous, I think, now that Silvie is good. This is a Stone Scale Band, a 0-cost Regalia with on enter, discard up to 3 ally cards. They don't have to be animal or beast, that's important. From your hand and or memory, then draw that many cards. So you may have never seen this card played because Silvie is not something that's gotten played a lot, Tamer's not gotten played a lot. But what this actually allows you to do is, especially after it's been popped from a Quicksilver, you can time this just right. You can put it into play when you have 3 ally cards in your memory. You discard those cards, and that's going to be really important in just a second for a couple other things. And then you get to draw 3 more cards, which effectively extends your turn. It gets rid of 3 cards you already spent and puts 3 new cards in your hand, so you can go ahead and play more slimes that turn. Really crazy, but even crazier is this: pay 1 and then exhaust or rest it. Until end of turn, you may activate ally cards as though they had fast activation. And that, there's some cool things we'll do out of the sideboard here as well, but that is a powerful way to actually allow you to use your Storm Slimes at fast speed to nuke the opponent kind of on their turn, maybe make them pop some of their protection on their turn, and then on your turn you can go off, or you can actually play your Storm Slime. In response, they maybe play a Spell Shroud effect, and then you activate Stone Scale Band and play another Storm Slime in response to take them out before their protection effect takes place. That is so powerful too. So Stone Scale Band is just honestly just a crazy card, especially when you put it under the Quicksilver Grail, so you can pop it out there exactly when you need it rather than having to use it during your, because if you just materialize this, you have to then try and get that advantage of kind of getting rid of 3 cards in memory and drawing 3 cards. You have to use that kind of during your recollection phase, otherwise you would have recollected 3 cards anyway. But it's really good under Quicksilver Grail. And now here, this card, this might be the strongest card under Quicksilver Grail. One of the strongest ones I can think of, for sure. Verdant Scepter is a pretty nutty card. It costs 1, and you are going to have to pay that 1. There's a bunch of floating memory in here too, though, so it's not a big deal. Class bonus, on enter, you may banish a slime ally you control. If you do, put an amount of refinement counters on the scepter equal to the banished ally's power plus 1. And then it has rest, remove a refinement counter from Verdant Scepter, put a buff counter on each of up to 2 slime allies you control, then draw a card. So normally if you have to play, it's like if you're playing the Recollection deck raw and you just have to materialize this during your materialize phase, it's going to require you to get rid of an ally before it attacks, you know, just that you had set up that lived a turn, to then put some counters on it, and then you can rest it to draw 1 card and put some buff counters on some other allies, hopefully. It's an okay card, and it allows you to then, you know, over time you can accrue value. It's an okay card in the Recollection deck. This card under Quicksilver Grail is insane. I think this changes the entire card to make it extremely powerful. Now what you get to do is you have a Slime King out, you have a Storm Slime out, whatever. You have something out here that's going to have like 4 to 6 power, and your opponent's probably going to want to get rid of it because, you know, it's got 4 to 6 power, or with Slime King it's got Taunt or something. Your opponent goes all out to take out your gigantic slime, your ethereal slime, whatever. You then pop your Quicksilver Grail, put the Verdant Scepter into play, banish the slime at fast speed after they, you know, with their spell resolving or with their attack resolving. You banish the slime at instant speed, at fast speed, get 1,000,000 refinement counters. You're gonna have like minimum 5 refinement counters on this thing. Then that turn, it's like your opponent's turn, then you can, at that time, you can also rest it to put buff counters if you have other slimes on, draw a card, then you'll start your turn, and then you will get to wake it up and immediately rest it again to draw another card off it, put more buff counters on. This gains so much value so fast, and you can get the value off of something you were going to lose anyway, which is really crazy. This allows you to banish the Slime King also if you want to, just to put the 3 things underneath. Maybe you picked up a Storm Slime underneath the Slime King and you want to just get another, that's another way to get a fast speed Storm Slime activation. This thing's crazy. If your game is going long at all, you want to be able to pull this out under your Quicksilver Grail, because this will give you so many cards where the opponent just won't, and so much power on the board, your opponent won't be able to keep up. So it's really here for the long game. A lot of your games you're going to go for Stone Scale Band or Horn because you're going to have just like a lethal turn because this deck is really, really explosive. But when you need a long game, Quicksilver Grail, Verdant Scepter is the play. So finally, we have a Safeguard Amulet. It's going to protect you against things like Scepter of Lumina, Rye damage, Xander damage, lots of things that are just going to try and hurt you right now. Tariff Ring, obviously really good against ally decks, against a lot of Lorraine decks, against Tristan decks now too, and against some other slime decks, where Safeguard Amulet's going to be good against more Storm Slime decks. So these are just two good protective cards to have right now, especially in this early metagame where you don't really know what you're going to face. These will give you a lot of outs to a lot of things. All right, so we talked a lot about the material deck, but that's because this deck is really wild. The material deck is really powerful. We're going to get into our slimes now and start talking about the, the main board. We have 4 Baby Gray Slimes. A lot of this, okay, right straight up, a lot of this is going to be just, we pulled the slimes out of the Recollection deck and put them in the deck because the slimes are all really good. They're all really powerful. They're what you want to run. Baby Gray Slime is a 1/1 intercept with on enter. You can reveal 2 slime cards from your hand and or memory to draw a card. So it's going to be a 1/1 interceptor that draws you a card. It can bash for 2 the turn you play it on turn 2 and you go to Silvie level 1. It can still bash for 2 or can intercept for 2, which can be pretty nice too. This is really cool off of a Slime King because they'll get rid of the taunter and then you'll get an interceptor into play that also drew you a card. It's just crazy. It does so much stuff. And it's a great target for Cremation Ritual because it already drew you 1 card from that. Then you can attack with it and then cremate it to draw 2 more cards. It's like the best of all worlds with this guy. It's just, the card is absolutely pushed, super powerful. We have 4 copies of Blissful Calling. I think this card has gained so much power now that our slimes are so good. I look at this deck, when I was thinking about this deck, this is a lot like, kind of trying to do like Rye combo stuff, but it gets to play a card that searches the top 5 for your combo pieces, for your Storm Slimes or for your Slime Kings or whatever. And it can play this, it only costs 1, it can play this turn 1 just to set up the exact card to level with, and then find some stuff to play later. But it also can find floating memory cards. It can find cards that draw more cards. It can find hasty messengers. It can find so much stuff. It's such a powerful card. I think this is an easy card to run in here because we're trying to specifically dig to find those those Storm Slimes to start going off. We have a lot of other good hits that work too. So yeah, Blissful Calling is awesome in here. Dungeon Guide, I don't know what I need to say about this. It lets you level faster. It lets you level to Silvie the turn you want to. You can potentially, if you have a good board, you can use this to get 2 cards off of Silvie with the pack, but really you usually want to use it just to get to Slime Sovereign to save the most value. And try and be selective with what you banish so you can banish slimes with it so that your Storm Slimes are a lot more powerful. But yeah, Dungeon Guide. It's Dungeon Guide. You guys know what Dungeon Guide is. At this point, it allows you to level fast, and that's what is really good. Even though it's not an animal or beast, that's okay. We still play it in here just to level fast. Escape the Wreckage is a new card from, well, I guess not a new card anymore. It was a newer card from Alchemical Revolution, one that was just starting to see fringes of some competitive play. I think it's an insane card in here because this is basically like Norm Element Reclaim. It costs 3 fast speed, return target ally you control to your memory. If you do, draw a card in your memory. This is Storm Slimes 5 through 8 in here, which is really cool. It means you can just find 1 Storm Slime and get to activate it multiple times by returning it to your memory and then replaying it again on the next turn. Or this has a ton of play with a ton of other cards in here, like Baby Gray Slime, and you just playing a Baby Gray Slime turn 1 and then escaping it just to draw a card into memory and then get to play it again to draw another card allows you to just churn through your deck so fast, which is just really, really sweet. You can use it to get the Slime King to leave again, so you get its on-leave trigger, so you can put a bunch of things into play after that. You can use it on your Young Beast Bonders if you want to get more buff counters, because Young Beast Bonder is a card we'll talk about in a sec, but actually these buff counters can add up really fast when your beasts are really, really strong in the end game. So it's another way to push a lot of damage too, which is really cool. And you can use it to protect your Limitless Slime if you want to. You don't usually need to do this, but Limitless Slime is our next ally. It is wow, this thing is so powerful. A lot of the time, our allies with floating memory are weak. The trade-off is they're weak, they don't do a lot, but they have that floating memory they can get. Yeah, Limitless Slime bucks that trend massively, where Limitless Slime is early on, sure, it's a weak floating memory, but late in the game, it is a kill condition all on its own. It becomes a 2/3 with whenever it attacks, you put a buff counter on it. It is only an animal, so it doesn't get like 2 buff counters from Young Beast Bonder, but you can use Verdant Scepter to put more counters on it if you want to, and it will just attack and go to town like crazy. And there's a cute little trick in here that we'll show you in a little bit too, where you can surprise your opponent a little bit in this deck as well. Young Beast Spawners in here because there's floating memory. We get to play Cremation Ritual, which you can use on Limitless Slime or Young Beast Spawner if you want to, just to get the cards and then get the floating memory into your graveyard. And it has on enter, put a buff counter on another target ally. If that ally is a beast, put 2 buff counters on it instead. That is really sweet. A lot of the time it's just going to put like a buff counter on a baby gray or on a baby red. But one thing I've done a lot is when I'm trying to get this level to 2, with Silvie, I want to try and get at least 1 card off of it. I'll play a red slime, which again is a target your opponent doesn't usually want to attack too much because it'll nuke the board when it does. And then you just go ahead and play a young beast spawner, put 2 more buff counters on it because the red slime is a beast. So it'll be a 5/4 on death. It's going to deal 5 damage to all allies. Your opponent's usually going to leave that alone unless they have some pretty specific interactions for it, which means that you're going to be able to pretty consistently get that level to 2. And then if you can like Dungeon Guide to 3, you can suddenly crash for 5 with the red slime and the damage becomes really live. It's really sweet, actually. It works really well. So I really like Young Beast Spawner is a crazy card in here too. Baby Red Slime. Baby Red Slime is very similar to Hasty Messenger in the role that it plays in this deck. It is a 2-cost 2/1 with on attack. You can discard a card. If you do, draw a card into your memory. I keep screwing that up. Don't draw it in hand. Draw it into memory. And if the discarded card was a fire element card, Baby Red Slime gets +1 until end of turn. So it actually crashes for 3 or potentially 4 on the turn you level to 1 with that Silvie Wilds Whisper, or maybe you put a counter on it with Young Beast Spawner. It does actually a lot of damage, and then it helps you pitch things like pitching Slime Eruption to it is so good because it's going to do more damage. You're going to get that floating memory. You can also just pitch Beast Spawners or Limitless Slimes to it just to get the floating memory set up. You don't really care as much about the damage unless it's like hitting a threshold to take out a specific ally you need to get rid of. But because our end game, we're just going to do too much damage anyway. It doesn't really matter that much. But yeah, it's useful for taking out allies early or just pushing some early damage to make the threshold a little smaller to take the opponent out. Creative Shock. This is a deck for Creative Shock because we just want to draw more cards, we want to find our Storm Slime, and we want to pitch our floating memories. That's what it does in here. You don't care about class bonus. We're just going to draw and we're going to discard. Cremation Ritual, similar thing. Our early allies are not important. They'll put a little damage in, but then you are okay sacking them, drawing cards. It allows you to get your Beast Spawner in the graveyard so that you can get floating memory off it. Same with Limitless Slime. Feel free to sack Baby Grays just to get a lot of value because you want to get your slimes in the discard as well. You want to get your allies in the discard because there is one particular regalia that I did not talk about yet. And you maybe caught me on that. You're like, why didn't you talk about it? Okay, so now we've said all that, it's time to talk about Gaia's Blessing. So we've looked at most of the allies in the deck. Gaia's Blessing, this thing is nuts in here. This card is insane, and you always want to use the element bonus for it to banish 4 animal and or beast ally cards from your graveyard to activate it from your material deck without paying its costs. Which means that you can, because it's an activation, not a materialize, you can do this during your main phase. It has more effects. This is play with the top card of your deck revealed, that you can activate animal and beast ally cards from the top of your deck, which is really cool. Again, if you're in a longer game, you need to grind it out, find some more allies to play. But the point of this card in here, I would play it if it didn't have any of that text, because this says, on the turn you level to 3, if you have 4 animals or beasts in your discard, from discarding them to Baby Red Slime, from Cremation Ritualing them, discarding them to Creative Shock, you may immediately banish 4 of those to put this into play, and when you banish them, now they've just made Storm Slime that much stronger. So you want to get these Baby Gray Slimes, Red Slimes, all this stuff into the graveyard so that you can banish those in order to play your Gaia's Blessing, in order to make your Storm Slimes do massive damage, and then accrue that value over time as well. So that, I finally go back to that and talk about that. I should have mentioned I was going to talk about that a little bit, but that is the point of Gaia's Blessing in here. Is super, super powerful, and that's why I say this is a combo-y style deck. We have 4 increasing danger because our end game is better than a lot of other decks' end game, so we're just going to draw a bunch of cards. It's okay if they draw it too, because we're just going to go off on them, and they're going to have a hard time keeping up with it. Red Slime, I talked a lot about this guy already, but he is our obligatory beast slime that is in here to help us trigger Silvie 2 sometimes, but also he cracks in for a lot of damage and can be kind of a cool ally board control in conjunction with Cremation Ritual as well if you need that, which is really cool too. We have 2 copies of Shout at Your Pets in here. This is a card that you can definitely side out. You can replace something else if you want, but it's kind of a cute card. It's just another discard outlet. Again, helping us discard those animals so you can activate Gaia's Blessing at a very cheap cost. draw a card, you can discard a floating memory to get value off of it, and it is fast speed, which means you can make your animals or beasts +1 level to enter turn. That's actually important if you're trying to like hold on to a limitless slime. Maybe you're trying to get that Silvie level 2 draw and your opponent's trying to take it out. You can actually use Shout at Your Pets at instant speed to gain a level to potentially get him from level 1 to 2 that turn, so he's got that +1/+2 buff, is a little harder to take out. And maybe you pitch a floating memory, and maybe they do end up taking him out, but now you have 2 floating memories, so it just works kind of nice. It's a nice little card that smooths things out a little bit. Nice little 2 of, and they're not a big deal though. For Slime Eruption. Slime Eruption is yet another way to banish slimes from your graveyard, and it has floating memory. Now keep in mind, Nullifying Lantern does shut this off. So, you know, you got to watch out for that. It doesn't totally shut it off because you can still choose 2 non-fire element slimes, but it shuts off you doing like a lot of damage with it. But yeah, you could still banish a couple of like baby gray slimes with it if you want to. A lot of the time, you're often just going to pitch this because this Gaia's Blessing is going to take care of all those slimes anyway, so it's not a big deal, but you want to do a little math. You can usually push a little bit of damage with it if you want to, or use it to clear things off the board if you really need to. It's a great card, though, to pitch to Baby Red Slime or to Creative Shock or to Shout at Your Pets to get that floating memory going. And then finally, I talked about Storm Slime, combo card, tons and tons and tons of damage. Like seriously, you can do 10, 11 damage per trigger with this. It is basically Arcane Blast on a 3/1, or if it's your first slime, a 5/3 body as well. It does so much damage, it's absolutely absurd. Ethereal Slime is another great one to play off of that Silvie Slime Sovereign trigger because this is a 2/2 with Pride 3, Stealth, and True Sight. The Pride 3 obviously doesn't matter too much. Stealth and True Sight are crazy keywords on this thing because it's so hard to take out, and it can hit anything. It can take out problematic threats with Stealth. And it has on enter, banish a Tamer card from your material deck if you do draw a card to put a buff counter on it. The point where you're playing this, you should know basically, do I need Beastbond Ears? Do I need Horn of Beast Calling? Are these things going to matter? So those are good targets to choose to banish with it because you want to draw that card and put a buff counter on it. You make it a 5/5 if it's the first time you play, or a 3/3 if it's the second, which is still perfectly respectable for what ended up costing you, 2 cards out of hand after it drew a card to replace itself. And then finally, Slime King. Oh, Slime King can enable some really, really powerful plays and can totally take over the game against ally decks where they have a hard time dealing with it, giving you so much time to take care of things and lots of extra value. 3 cost 4/5. As an additional cost to activate him, you have to banish 3 slime ally cards with different elements from your graveyard. Once again, Nullifying Lantern will shut this off. So if you're very worried about Nullifying Lanterns, we do have Verdant Slime in the sideboard that you can use to take those out, which I would highly recommend doing. But otherwise, Slime King is, if there is no Nullifying Lantern play, you have to have those 3 different element slimes in your graveyard. Another reason why we play so much discard, why we like playing Fire to get Creative Shocks, the Shout at Your Pets to be able to pitch those cards. And keep in mind also, for discarding cards, Stone Scale Band will discard them out of your memory to set up for Gaia's Blessing, to set up for Slime King. And that gives you a lot of selection on exactly what you discard, so you can use that Stone Scale Band to be able to set up to play that Slime King. Now, if you are able to banish those 3, then you are able to play the Slime King. It'll come in as a 4/5. If it's the first slime you play that turn, it'll come in as a mighty 6/7 taunt. Pride 4, so you do need the Beastbond Ears or that little +1 level from Shout at Your Pets sometimes in order to get a crack in with it if that's important. And importantly, it's going to banish those 3 cards, those 3 slimes underneath it. And then when it leaves, you get to play all 3 of those slimes that were banished with it and immediately get all their cool effects, which means you can get Storm Slimes on enter, you can get Ethereal Slimes on enter, you can get Baby Grays on enter, you can have a Baby Red. It doesn't have an on enter, but you can have one and you can attack, or put a red slime out or something. Slime King is going to not only just like stabilize the game for you against ally decks, but it does have it banishes those 3 slimes, which means they are currently banished. So if you play a Slime King and then play a Storm Slime, it's going to get +3 damage from the 3 slimes that were banished to Slime King, as well as the rest of your banished slimes. So that's just part of the combo. So just to go over it again, you're trying to get to level 3, have as many banished slimes as possible, either using tricks like Gaia's Blessing, Slime King, just paying with floating memory. Remember, Slime Eruption is a slime as well, so it will add to the damage from Storm Slime. Use your floating memory from Limitless Slime in order to increase that damage. You use all your little tricks there. Oh yeah, Verdant Scepter banishes too. Storm Slimes on death banishes. Lots of ways to banish slimes. Get a large amount of slimes banished and then just nuke with Storm Slime. play another one, attack with the first one, attack with the second, escape the wreckage of Storm Slime so you can play it again next turn. These are all the little tricks you're going to use just to deal as much damage as possible and just nuke the opponent out of the game. And if you really need to, if they're playing hard to get and they've got Spell Shroud and stuff, just cracking in with Ethereal Slime or Storm Slime does a ton of damage as well. And even Red Slime they do a lot of damage. So that is the core list there. Now, just for a quick look at our sideboard, again, I always say with your sideboard, you want to tweak it to your local metagame. This is the sideboard I'm rocking right now, and I'll explain why each of these pieces are in here. And by the way, as a reminder, the sideboard rule is now for Season 2, 15 cards total, except Regalia cards count as 3. So it says 15. We have 15 for the sideboard here. That's because we have 3 Regalia adding up to 9, and then 6 non-Regalia cards. So for our sideboard, Beastbond Boots is in here because, well, this deck's good. And this is a way for you to fight mirrors, fight other Storm Slime decks, as well as Rye decks, which are obviously, you know, going to have a little bit of popularity after World Championship. But yeah, it's just a useful card to have here, and something you can put under Quicksilver Grail as well, which I think is really clutch. So your opponent has to play into it, and then you can pop the Quicksilver, pop the boots, and get them. Viridian Protective Trinket. There are a lot of powerful water decks running around right now, and they are going to try and interact with you, and we don't want that. We don't want them interacting with us. We don't want them frostbinding our slimes. You sometimes are going to go kind of lower on cards just to get to level 3. We can't be messing around with that. So Viridian Protective Trinket bringing his water so that you can stop them from having as much interaction for you on your turn. Covenant of Thorns. There are a lot of matchups where this is really sweet. Obviously against Merlin, you can put this on Majestic. You put this on their, remember, you can put this on their unit. Put it on their Majestic Spirits. Now all the damage they deal to you has to go to the Majestic Spirit. So in order to take you out, they have to get rid of their own Majestic Spirit, which is really sweet. Buys you lots of time, and you can actually just nuke them through Majestic Spirit, potentially. You can Storm Slime their Majestic Spirit and then start to dunk on them with your Storm Slimes afterwards, or attack at a Majestic Spirit with all your big Ethereal Slimes, whatever. You can easily get through that Majestic Spirit, especially if you can get them to just take it out themselves. But the big deck that I think people need to be aware of with Covenant of Thorns now is if your opponent is playing Tristan, when they get to, and they're using level 3, when they get to level 3 and they put out their Ominous Shadows that prevent 3 damage each time damage would be dealt to them. If you put a Covenant of Thorns on one of their shadow tokens and they don't have a way to remove their own shadow token, like a Zephyr or something, they're going to have a really hard time winning that game, because any source of damage that gets dealt to you gets dealt to the shadow, and then 3 of it gets prevented. So they have to actually deal like a chunk of 7 damage at once just to take out their own shadow to get rid of Covenant. So this will buy you lots of time, especially, please put this under Quicksilver Grail. Putting it under Quicksilver Grail allows you to respond to whatever your opponent is doing with surprise. Now whatever you're doing is going to that unit in particular, and you can really just save yourself a lot of, buy yourself a lot of time and totally save the game with Covenant of Thorns under Quicksilver Grail. Finally, we earned 3 Twilight Slime in here. Twilight Slime is a really cool slime to play fast speed off of Stone Scale Band, and that's really the core use of it. You really want to have it in here as, again, it's another way to fight other slime decks or other Rye decks or potentially Merlin decks. There are some decks that are playing spells that are going to do a lot of damage to you. So Twilight Slime played at fast speed off of Stone Scale Band is going to negate a lot of stuff sometimes. Now, if you just throw Twilight Slime out there, it's going to be pretty vulnerable. It's pretty easy to take out. Just a 1/3. It can be a 3/5. But if you put it out there with a Slime King, then maybe you're a little safer, and that can make your Slime King almost impossible to deal with for some decks too. So yeah, really cool card just to have if it looks like that Spell Shroud is going to be very useful. And then finally, Verdant Slime is in here because you have to have a way to get rid of Nullifying Lantern, is something that we found. So it is a good option. It's a searchable option because of Blissful Calling. So I like it better than, we're playing Fire, so we could play things like Meltdown and stuff, but I like that you can find this. You only really care about getting rid of that stuff once you get to level 3 anyway. So the Terra thing isn't a cost. And even if it isn't good, even if they didn't play Nullifying or you draw multiple copies, it comes in as a 4/4 taunt, which is nothing to sneeze at anyway. It's never going to attack probably in this deck unless you put out Ears and use Shout at Your Pets, but it's just going to soak up damage and block the way. And if you put a Verdant Slime under a Slime King, your opponent's like never getting through you either. So So that's the deck. I know I talked for a really long time. I could talk for much longer, and I will, because we will have more Silvie deck profiles coming, but I love this Fire Silvie deck profile. It is so explosive. It is so powerful. It has some insanely cool plays. It's actually harder to play than you might think because of all these tricky sequences that you have to do. You have multiple things that are like the next time you do this, the first time you do this. And you have to kind of like maneuver around those to get the right plays. You have tricky things like using Stone Scale Band at fast speed to discard allies, or playing allies at fast speed, or setting up your, getting your Guy's Blessing set up, Verdant Scepter plays. Like there's a lot of fun plays you can build into there. And it is also just a bunch of powerful, explosive plays that you get with the power of Storm Slime. So I hope you guys give this deck a try, because I think this deck is really, really strong. I think with some refinement over time over the metagame, this is a contender for being played at major events. It is pretty hard to interact with because you can't deal with that Banish Zone. It's just you're looking for damage prevention and Spell Shroud to get around it, and you can Storm Slime so many times that you can run them out of that, and you can hold down the board with taunt units, and you can just attack their face anyway with huge power. It's like, it's really robust. It's really resilient. It is really powerful. That is the FireStorm Silvie deck. Give it a shot, sleeve it up. Let me know in the comments down below how the deck does for you, what you think of her. If you're excited about Silvie, we will have more Silvie deck profiles and other cool deck profiles coming in the future, because MRC is an awesome set. The Recollection decks are amazing, and the metagame is looking so exciting right now. So make sure you stay tuned to Main Deck for more Grand Archive deck profiles. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you in the next one.